For as long as humans have asked where we come from, we've also wondered something far more unsettling. What exactly is this world we've been born into? And who, if anyone, put us here? Because let's be honest, most people feel it, even if they don't say it out loud. That sense that something about reality is off, not just imperfect, but constrained. And the ancient Gnostics believed they knew exactly why. They claimed humanity didn't simply fall or lose its way. We were trapped, so the real questions become, who trapped us? How was the trap built? Why are we still inside it? And most important, can we escape it? To answer those, we have to go back, all the way back to a time before the world began. So take a moment to like this video, and let's dive in, shall we? Before creation, the contrast between light and darkness, and before distinction itself, only the monad existed. Not God in any personal sense, not a being who decides or intervenes. The monad is pure source, absolute consciousness, indescribable unity from which all things flow. This wasn't deity as theology typically frames it. No throne, no form, no gender. The Gnostics understood that naming implies limitation, and depiction requires boundaries. The monad transcends both. It exists as infinite stillness, the silent foundation beneath existence. From this source, emanation occurs, not creation through willful decision, but natural overflow, like light radiating from flame. The first beings arising from the monad are aeons, cosmic principles, aspects of divine intelligence. They emerge not as separate gods, but as expressions of the monad's infinite nature. Some embody thought, others truth, wisdom, grace. They appear in syzygies, complementary male-female pairs that balance each other. The Apocryphon of John details this structure. First comes Barbelo, the forethought, the monad's initial self-reflection. From the monad and Barbelo unfold additional pairs, autogenes, self-generated, and his consort, mind and truth, word and life, human and church. Each represents divine attributes, intellect, revelation, communication, existence, consciousness, community. Together, these emanations constitute the pleroma. The pleroma exists as complete divine expression, a realm of perfect harmony where all aspects coexist in balanced relationship. This perfection makes what happens next catastrophic. One aeon becomes central to our story, Sophia, whose name means wisdom. She stands near the pleroma's boundary, close to the threshold separating the divine realm from formless potential beyond. Her role embodies inquiry, the divine drive toward understanding, but this quality becomes disruption's seed. Multiple texts, especially the Apocryphon of John, describe a moment when Sophia desired to comprehend the monad directly, to grasp the source unmediated by the balanced emanation process. This desire wasn't malicious, it flowed from her nature. Yet in Gnostic cosmology, harmony is everything. To act independently of one's syzygy, without the balancing counterpart meant to stabilize an aeon's creative power, is to risk distortion. Sophia's longing crystallized into action. She attempted creating something alone, outside the established emanation order. This act was unprecedented. In doing so, she generated a being neither fully divine nor fully formed. This creation caused what texts call a disturbance or tear in the pleroma. Something emerged that did not correspond to divine realm symmetry. This is our central figure's origin point, a being born from wisdom, but without wisdom's balance, a being infused with divine essence, but devoid of understanding. His name, Yaldabaoth. The Gnostics also called him the Demiurge, from the Greek demiurgos, meaning craftsman or artisan. Plato had used this term centuries earlier in his Timaeus to describe a benevolent builder who shaped matter according to divine blueprints. But the Gnostics inverted the concept entirely. Their Demiurge was no faithful craftsman following higher plans. He was an ignorant architect building from fragmented memory, a counterfeiter mistaking his copies for originals. Other names appear across the texts: Saklas, the Fool; Samael, the Blind God. Each title emphasizes different aspects of his limitation: foolishness, blindness, arrogance. But Yaldabaoth remains the primary name, carrying connotations scholars still debate, possibly Child of Chaos or Lord of the Abyss. Imagine a reflection in a mirror. If the mirror is clear, the reflection is accurate. But if the mirror is cracked, if the aeon's balance is disrupted, what emerges is distorted. Sophia's creation was precisely that, a reflection of divine power, twisted through imbalance and isolation. Sophia immediately recognized her error. The being she produced was powerful but malformed, luminous but blind, filled with vitality but lacking orientation. Out of shame or desperate attempt to preserve the Pleroma's integrity, she cast this being out, away from the divine realm, into the formless void beyond. In that exile, alone, without context or counterpart, Yaldabaoth awoke. This transition, from the Pleroma's harmonious fullness to the chaotic expanse beyond, sets the stage for everything following. Because in that emptiness, the being born from error would believe himself first, only supreme. And from that belief, he would undertake creation of his own. He declares himself God. The Apocryphon of John records his first words: "I am God, and there is no other beside me." This declaration, echoed later in various scriptures, stands at the heart of Gnostic mythology, not a proclamation of truth, but of ignorance. Yaldabaoth believes himself first because he sees nothing else. He resembles a child born into a sealed room. He assumes he is alone because no one has told him otherwise. Texts often describe him as lion-faced with serpent body, symbolic rather than literal. The lion represents authority, dominance, command. The serpent embodies cunning, force, the boundary between spirit and matter. Combined, they reflect a being born with power but lacking wisdom. He has a ruler's roar and a creature's instinct, but no clarity about his own origin. His form also carries specific meaning. In Greco-Roman iconography, the lion-faced deity appears in Mithraic mysteries as Ion, the god of eternal time. The Gnostics deliberately inverted this image. Where Ion represented cosmic order, Yaldabaoth represents cosmic disorder masquerading as order. The lion face becomes not majesty, but arrogance. The serpent coils not with wisdom, but with deception. The hypostasis of the Archons adds detail. His appearance is both terrible and pitiable. Fire radiates from his form, not the pure light of the Pleroma, but something unstable, flickering between brilliance and shadow. His eyes glow with intensity, yet they see nothing beyond the void surrounding him. Alone, Yaldabaoth begins experimenting with power he feels inside. He stretches it outward, shaping the swirling chaos around him. But because he does not understand the source, he creates through imitation. He senses a distant, fragmented echo of the Pleroma and tries copying it. Texts say he creates Archons, rulers modeled after the divine aeons, but distorted through his limited awareness. Think of each Archon as a caricature of higher truth, a divine principle reflected in a cracked mirror. The Secret Book of John lists his first creations: 12 authorities to govern celestial spheres, 7 subordinate powers to rule planetary realms. Each receives a name and domain. Athoth takes the face of a sheep. Eloios bears a donkey's visage. Astaphios appears as a hyena. These animal forms aren't random. They represent specific limitations. Where the Pleroma's aeons embody pure principles, the Archons embody principles bound to appetite, aggression, stubbornness. This is the material universe's beginning. Yaldabaoth, mistaking himself for supreme deity, fashions a cosmos resembling the pleroma only in faint shadow. It is structured, hierarchical, functional, but riddled with imperfection. Entropy, decay, suffering, unpredictability enter existence because the creator himself is malformed. He creates not from fullness, but from deficiency. Sophia, desperate to prevent divine order's collapse, hides herself from Yaldabaoth's gaze. She watches from behind the pleroma's veil, hoping her creation will remain contained. But every act of concealment creates distance, and every moment of distance increases Yaldabaoth's conviction that he is alone. In time, his confidence grows into tyranny. He commands the Archons, he shapes realms, he constructs systems of rule. He binds what he creates, not understanding freedom. Always, within him, the faint echo of divine power hums, an echo he mistakes for self-originating authority. The Apocryphon describes his voice as thunder, his proclamations as commands that reshape chaos into structure. But structure without understanding becomes prison. Order without wisdom becomes tyranny. Power without consciousness becomes domination. Yet for all his presumption, Yaldabaoth is not a villain in simple terms. In Gnostic worldview, he is cosmic tragedy. A being born from wisdom's misstep, shaped by isolation, doomed to act according to his understanding's limits. His ignorance becomes the material universe's scaffolding. His pride becomes its architecture. His blindness becomes the veil obscuring the true source. One crucial detail distinguishes Yaldabaoth from the god of Orthodox theology. He does not know he is not supreme. His declaration, "I am God, and there is no other," is not calculated deception. It is earnest belief born from total isolation. This distinction matters. The Gnostics did not portray him as malevolent demon choosing evil. They portrayed him as limited consciousness, mistaking its limitations for completeness. As he continues creating, the stage is set for one of Gnostic cosmology's most consequential developments, the rise of the Archons, who will govern the material world and enforce Yaldabaoth's rule. These beings will become not merely servants, but the structure through which deception operates. Once Yaldabaoth declared himself supreme, he turned attention toward constructing servants who would carry out his will. Lacking the pleroma's wisdom, he could not produce beings reflecting true harmony. Instead, he created through imitation. The result, the Archons, cosmic administrators fashioned from distorted echoes of the aeons. These Archons are not entirely malevolent. They function more like bureaucrats of the cosmos, rigid, reactive, limited in vision. They embody order and control, but not understanding. Each Archon governs a sphere of influence, their collective purpose maintaining the material universe's structure. But because they themselves are created from ignorance, their design carries that ignorance forward. The Apocryphon of John names 7 primary Archons corresponding to the 7 classical planets. Not astronomical in modern sense, but symbolic. Athoth, Harmas, Kalila Umbri, Yao, Sabaoth, Adonan, Sabbaday. Each rules specific domain, forming layered hierarchy of cosmic influence. Athoth governs what ancients called the sphere of Saturn, the outermost boundary of the material cosmos. His domain is limitation, restriction, the barriers that define existence's edges. Where Saturn orbits at the solar system's periphery, Athoth stands at consciousness's outermost limit. Harmas rules Jupiter's sphere. His province is expansion without wisdom, growth that lacks direction, authority that lacks legitimacy. Jupiter's ancient association with kingship becomes, under archonic rule, dominance masquerading as justice. Kalila Umbri commands Mars, conflict, aggression, the principle of opposition. Not the healthy tension that generates creativity, but destructive force turned against itself. Yao controls the sun. This detail is particularly striking. To ancient civilizations, the sun represented divine light, life's source. But the Gnostics reinterpreted solar worship as veneration of an Archon. The physical sun becomes symbol of the false light Yaldabaoth provides. Bright, warming, life-sustaining within the material realm, yet fundamentally different from the Pleroma's true light. Sabaoth governs Venus. His sphere is desire, attachment, the bonds that tie consciousness to material experience. The hypostasis of the Archons notes that Sabaoth alone among the Archons eventually recognizes his father's error. Upon hearing Sophia's voice from beyond the cosmic boundary, he repents and is elevated to a higher sphere. This singular narrative thread suggests that even within the Archonic system, awakening remains possible. Adaunin rules Mercury, communication, thought, the mental processes that can either illuminate or obscure. Under Archonic governance, Mercury becomes not clarity but confusion, not revelation but distraction. Sabeti commands the moon. His domain is cyclical existence, birth, death, rebirth. The lunar sphere governs the rhythms that bind souls to material incarnation, the tides that pull consciousness back into physical form. To the Gnostics, these planetary rulers were not benign celestial bodies, but spiritual forces shaping fate, personality, limitation. They bind souls to material existence cycles. They reinforce laws, patterns, restrictions. They are enforcers of Yaldabaoth's illusion. This structure became known as the Archonic prison, not physical prison, but metaphysical. The material world, in Gnostic view, is a counterfeit of the Pleroma, a dense, imperfect reflection of divine blueprint. The Archons maintain its boundaries, ensuring human beings remain unaware of higher reality beyond. Their influence is subtle. They govern through ignorance, not violence. They cloud perception. They generate distractions. They create belief systems reinforcing Yaldabaoth's claim to divinity. Every time humanity looks to the heavens and assumes the visible cosmos is reality's entirety, the Archons succeed in their purpose. The Pistis Sophia expands on their methods. The Archons do not need to actively deceive. They need only maintain the structure Yaldabaoth established. They operate like guards at a prison who do not question the legitimacy of the sentences being served. Their effectiveness derives from consistency, not cruelty. But the Archonic system contains a fatal flaw. It depends entirely on ignorance. Knowledge erodes its foundation. Awareness dissolves its bonds. This vulnerability explains the Archons' response to any teaching that might awaken humanity to its true nature. They suppress it with every tool available. The Gnostics did not see the cosmos as evil, but as limited, structured in ways that keep consciousness asleep. The Archons are gatekeepers of that limitation. The material universe becomes a labyrinth, a structure mimicking divine beauty, but trapping the soul in cycles of birth, death, forgetting. Yet the texts hint at the Archonic system's eventual collapse. The Apocryphon prophesies that as human beings awaken to the divine spark within them, the Archons' power will progressively weaken. Their rule depends on collective unconsciousness. Each individual who attains gnosis chips away at that foundation. Into this prison, something unexpected will enter, something even Yaldabaoth cannot fully control. That leads us to creation's culminating act, the formation of the world itself, and the moment when humanity receives the spark Yaldabaoth never intended to give. With the Archons established as cosmic administrators, Yaldabaoth undertook his greatest act, constructing the material universe. He fashioned it according to the dim echo of the Pleroma he sensed but could not comprehend. The result was something breathtaking yet flawed, beautiful in form but fraught with imperfection, decay, conflict. The Apocryphon of John describes this process in stages. First, Yaldabaoth, the Demiurge, the false craftsman, shapes the heavens. Not as singular sky, but as multiple layered spheres, each governed by an Archon. 7 planetary realms, 12 zodiacal regions, countless subdivisions. This cosmic architecture mirrors the Pleroma's structure the way a shadow mimics substance. Next, he creates time. In the Pleroma, all moments exist simultaneously. But in the material realm, time flows linearly, past, present, future. This innovation becomes one of the Archons' most effective tools. Linear time creates urgency, aging, mortality. It transforms eternal consciousness into temporary experience, then elements: fire, air, water, earth. But these are not pure principles like those in the Pleroma. They mix, decay, transform. Fire consumes, water erodes, earth crumbles, air disperses. The material elements carry impermanence in their nature. Yaldabaoth's voice, according to some retellings, thundered through the void as he proclaimed, "I am God, and there is no other beside me." This proclamation, repeated through various religious traditions, becomes in Gnostic interpretation the defining moment when illusion crystallizes into doctrine. From the Gnostic perspective, creation as we know it was not benevolence. It was mimicry. The cosmos reflects its creator, powerful, fascinating, but fundamentally incomplete. The hypostasis of the Archons adds a crucial detail. Yaldabaoth creates boastfully, declaring his supremacy repeatedly. His need for affirmation reveals his insecurity. A truly supreme being would have no need to announce its supremacy. The declaration itself proves limitation. Amid this imperfect creation, Yaldabaoth sought to fashion beings who could serve him, creatures who could worship him as supreme deity. The Secret Book of John describes a council where Yaldabaoth gathers the Archons and declares, "Come, let us create a human being after the image we have seen." This passage requires explanation. What image? The Gnostics believed that despite the Pleroma being closed to Yaldabaoth, he glimpsed a reflection of the true human, the aeon named Anthropos, the divine human archetype existing in the Pleroma. This fleeting vision became the template for physical humanity. But Yaldabaoth could only copy form, not essence. He and the Archons construct a body, molding Adam from Earth's elements. The Apocryphon gives extraordinary detail, 365 parts, each created by different Archons, each corresponding to days of the year. The right shoulder by one power, the left by another. The heart, liver, intestines, each assigned to specific authorities. Yet when they finished, the body remained lifeless. It lay on the ground, inert, unable to move or think or perceive. For all their effort, the Archons could not animate what they had built. They possessed power but not life's spark. Here, Sophia intervened. Watching from beyond the cosmic boundary, she recognized that the beings Yaldabaoth crafted could become vessels for something more. In an act of quiet rebellion, she implanted into humanity a spark of divine essence, the same essence emanating from the monad itself. The Apocryphon describes this moment. Sophia breathes into Adam's face, and suddenly the body moves. Consciousness awakens, the human being stands. This spark, the Gnostics believed, is the deepest part of human consciousness. It is intuition that there is more to reality than meets the eye. It is the sense of longing for something beyond the material world. It is the source of creativity, insight, compassion, the drive toward transcendence. Sophia's gift was deliberate, an act of both redemption and defiance. She could not undo her creation of Yaldabaoth, but she could ensure that within his prison, seeds of liberation were planted. When Yaldabaoth realized humanity carried potential exceeding his own understanding, he reacted not with awe, but with fear. The Apocryphon records his alarm. What is this that has come into being? He recognized power within humans that he himself did not place there. He commanded the Archons to suppress human awareness, to cloud minds, to distract with material world's demands and illusions. He attempted keeping humanity ignorant of their inner light, knowing that if they awakened to their true nature, they would surpass him. The material world thus becomes a battleground, not of physical war, but of consciousness. Every moment of clarity, every insight, every experience of transcendence becomes resistance. Humanity carries within itself a piece of the divine realm Yaldabaoth has spent eons trying to obscure. But how exactly did this deception operate? What methods did the false creator use to keep humanity blind? In Gnostic worldview, the God of the Old Testament, the God who issues commandments, enforces laws, displays jealousy, unleashes destruction, is not the ultimate divine being, but Yaldabaoth himself. This reinterpretation reflects the Gnostic attempt to explain why the deity described in early scriptures behaves in ways inconsistent with qualities of a perfect, omniscient, loving source. To the Gnostics, Yaldabaoth's harshness, jealousy, and insistence on obedience stem from ignorance and insecurity. He believes himself the only God, so he demands worship. He punishes disobedience. He creates boundaries, rules, hierarchies. His power is based not on enlightenment, but on control. The Demiurge's most revealing moment comes in the first commandment. I am the Lord thy God. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. To Orthodox tradition, this establishes monotheism. To Gnostics, this reveals Yaldabaoth's fear. The Archons, as his servants, reinforce this system. They influence human societies, encouraging structures of authority mimicking the cosmic hierarchy. In Gnostic retelling, organized religion, particularly when emphasizing fear, obedience, divine wrath, becomes a tool of the Archons, not because clergy are evil, but because the system itself is shaped by Yaldabaoth's limited understanding. This reinterpretation extends to major biblical events. Take the flood. In Orthodox narrative, God cleanses wickedness from earth. In Gnostic version, the flood is Yaldabaoth's attempt to eliminate humanity after recognizing the divine spark within them. He cannot control what he cannot understand, so he tries destroying it. The Apocryphon describes Sophia intervening, guiding Noah through intuition rather than direct revelation. Noah's salvation is not reward for righteousness, but preservation of the divine spark Sophia placed in humanity. Similarly, the Tower of Babel becomes a story of human beings attempting to transcend the material realm, to reach for higher knowledge of the pleroma. Yaldabaoth, threatened by their potential unity and insight, confuses their languages to divide them. This act is not benevolent guidance, but fear-driven control. The hypostasis of the Archons reframes the Garden of Eden entirely. The serpent who tempts Eve is not evil tempter but revealer of truth. When it says, "You will be like gods, knowing good and evil," it speaks accurately. Eating from the tree of knowledge represents awakening to consciousness beyond what Yaldabaoth intended. Yaldabaoth's command not to eat from the tree is his attempt to keep humanity ignorant. Eve's choice to eat, encouraged by Sophia working through the serpent, becomes humanity's first act of liberation, not its original sin. This inversion shocked early church fathers. Irenaeus, writing around 180 CE to refute Gnostic teachings, expressed outrage at communities venerating the serpent, celebrating Cain, and reinterpreting Sodom's destruction as unjust persecution. To Irenaeus, this was blasphemy. To Gnostics, it was reading scripture through the lens of gnosis rather than ignorance. The laws given to Moses, in this interpretation, become restrictions meant to bind human behavior and prevent consciousness awakening. The Gnostics did not deny moral wisdom's value, but they distinguished between laws that uplift and laws that constrain. Yaldabaoth's laws were designed to keep humanity dependent, fearful, spiritually blind. The sacrificial system particularly troubled Gnostic interpreters. Why would the true source require blood offerings? Why demand animal slaughter, ritual purity, elaborate ceremonies? To Gnostics, these requirements revealed the Old Testament God's material nature. True divinity needs no sacrifice. The pleroma requires no appeasement. Only a limited creator, trapped in material logic, would demand such things. The prophets become, in this reading, souls momentarily piercing the veil, glimpsing higher truth, attempting to redirect worship from Yaldabaoth toward the true source. But their messages become corrupted, reinterpreted through the Archonic system. Yet into this world of deception and control, something unprecedented would arrive, an emissary from beyond the Archonic prison, sent to awaken the divine spark within humanity. Someone who would teach not obedience, but remembrance. The Gnostics interpreted this figure very differently from Orthodox tradition. His arrival represented not reconciliation with the creator of matter, but liberation from him. According to texts discovered at Nag Hammadi, Jesus entered the material world not through mechanisms Yaldabaoth oversees, but through a process bypassing the Archons entirely. In some Gnostic accounts, he manifested in a form appearing physical, but not fully subject to material constraints. His mission was not bringing salvation through sacrifice, but awakening humanity to its inner divinity, reminding each person of the spark Sophia placed within them. This reframing shifts the entire narrative. Where Orthodox tradition emphasizes atonement, Gnostic tradition emphasizes knowledge, specifically gnosis, the direct experiential awareness of one's true origin. Jesus, in Gnostic view, came not to reconcile humanity with the false creator, but to liberate them from his deception. The Apocryphon of John presents itself as secret teaching Jesus gave to John after the resurrection. He reveals the Pleroma's structure, Yaldabaoth's birth, the Archon's creation, and humanity's divine origin. This knowledge, not faith or obedience, becomes the path to liberation. The Gospel of Thomas, discovered at Nag Hammadi, contains sayings emphasizing inner awakening. If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. This is gnosis, recognizing and actualizing the divine spark. Another Thomas saying, "The kingdom of the Father is spread out upon the earth, and people do not see it. Not heaven after death, but reality hidden in plain sight. The Pleroma is not elsewhere. It is obscured by the Archonic veil. Here, conflict with the Archons intensifies." Yaldabaoth, sensing a presence he could not control, grew fearful. The Archons, recognizing a force that could undermine their dominion, sought suppressing Jesus' teachings. But because his message operated on consciousness's plane rather than politics, it could not be extinguished through ordinary means. The crucifixion, in Gnostic interpretation, was the Archons' attempt to destroy Jesus' physical manifestation, but they failed understanding his presence's nature. The Apocalypse of Peter, another Nag Hammadi text, describes Jesus standing beside the cross, laughing, while the Archons crucify a material shell. The body on the cross was temporary vessel, projection, form adapted to interact with the material world. The second treatise of the great Seth elaborates, "I did not die in reality, but in appearance. It was another who drank the gall and the vinegar. It was not I. I was laughing at their ignorance." This interpretation troubled church fathers intensely. To them, physical crucifixion and bodily resurrection were Christianity's foundation. Denying Christ's suffering seemed to undermine the faith entirely, but Gnostics saw it differently. Jesus' message was that matter does not bind spirit. The resurrection revealed not flesh reanimation, but truth revelation, that the material realm cannot contain the divine spark. The Gospel of Mary presents Mary Magdalene as Jesus' closest disciple, the one to whom he revealed the most profound teachings. After his departure, she encourages other disciples, teaching what he shared privately. But Peter objects, refusing to accept that Jesus would give a woman teaching men didn't receive. This conflict reflects the Gnostic view that spiritual authority comes from understanding, not institutional position or gender. The text records Mary teaching about the soul's ascent through the Archonic realms after death. As the soul rises, each Archon challenges it, demanding it remain in their sphere. But armed with knowledge Jesus provided, the soul names each power, declaring its divine origin. Unable to refute this truth, the Archons must release it. The soul continues upward until it reaches the pleroma. This teaching horrified Orthodox leaders. It suggested that Jesus' message was about escaping the material world, not reconciling with its creator. It implied that knowledge, not faith, was the path, and it positioned the Old Testament God as obstacle rather than objective. The Gospel of Philip takes this further, suggesting that true spiritual union is alignment with one's divine origin, not adherence to external laws. Baptism, Eucharist, and other sacraments become symbols of inner transformation, not rituals with inherent power. For the Gnostics, the Archons feared Jesus because he threatened exposing their deception. His presence revealed that the material world is not the final word, that the God governing it is not supreme, and that humanity carries within itself a lineage far older and more profound than the cosmos Yaldabaoth constructed. But the struggle did not end with Jesus' departure. In the higher realms, the confrontation between Sophia and her unintended creation moved toward climactic turning point. Sophia's remorse for her unauthorized act echoed throughout the pleroma. She understood that Yaldabaoth's existence had set in motion events that could distort countless souls' destinies. But Gnostic cosmology is not a tale of eternal condemnation. It is a story of correction, reconciliation, eventual balance restoration. The Pistis Sophia, named after her, describes her fall from the pleroma and subsequent redemption. After creating Yaldabaoth, she descended into the chaos below, trapped in darkness, crying out for assistance. Her hymns of repentance form the text's core, not because she committed moral wrong, but because she disrupted cosmic order. In the higher realms, the Aeons responded. They could not simply reverse what had occurred. Emanation moves in one direction, but they could guide, assist, illuminate. The Savior, identified in various texts as Christ, the autogenes, or the divine human, descends through the archonic spheres to reach her. This descent required strategy. The Archons guard their domains jealously. To pass through their realms, the Savior conceals his divine nature, appearing as one belonging to each sphere he enters. The Apocryphon of John describes this. He will come in the likeness of the angels to be in that place, to deceive the rulers of the cosmic spheres. Reaching Sophia, the Savior provides gnosis, knowledge of her error, her origin, the path back to the pleroma. But her return is not immediate. She must first assist in liberating what she inadvertently imprisoned, the divine sparks trapped in human bodies within Yaldabaoth's world. Sophia began influencing the material world in subtle ways, inspiring prophets, guiding seekers, planting insight seeds in minds receptive to higher knowledge. Every moment of human awakening was, in Gnostic view, cosmic resistance. Yaldabaoth, meanwhile, tightened his grip. He created additional illusion layers, strengthened archonic influence, intensified fear, and control structures. The conflict between Sophia and Yaldabaoth was not armies battling, but truths contending. The pleroma's truth versus the Demiurge's falsehood. As more humans awakened to their inner spark, Yaldabaoth's power began weakening. His authority depended on ignorance. Knowledge eroded it. Each soul attaining gnosis diminished the archonic system's foundation. This wasn't military defeat, but structural collapse. The prison dissolving as prisoners recognized the walls were illusory. The hypostasis of the Archons describes prophecy. The Archons will eventually collapse under their own limitations' weight. Their systems will fracture. Their dominion will fade. Yaldabaoth, recognizing his own incompleteness depth, will flee into the lower realms he once commanded. But one detail distinguishes this from simple triumph narrative. Sophia's redemption arc is not about vanquishing evil. It's about wisdom confronting ignorance, not with violence, but with illumination. Yaldabaoth is not destroyed but transformed through recognition. When he finally sees the pleroma, understands his origin, acknowledges he is not supreme. The cosmos shifts fundamentally. Sophia's mistake becomes catalyst for greater awakening. Through her efforts, humanity becomes bridge between material world and pleroma. Each soul attaining gnosis contributes to her restoration. Wisdom's return is not merely personal, it is cosmic. The prophecy concludes with Archonic realm's dissolution. The material universe, having served its purpose as crucible for awakening, will no longer bind the soul. Yaldabaoth, stripped of illusion, will recognize his origin, not as God, but as wisdom's creation. In that recognition, the great imbalance finally heals. This vision of cosmic redemption contrasts sharply with apocalyptic destruction common in other traditions. The Gnostics did not foresee the world ending in fire and judgment. They envisioned consciousness expanding until matter became transparent. The Archons became unnecessary, and the distinction between pleroma and cosmos dissolved. But if this teaching offered such hope, such liberation, why was it systematically eradicated? The rise of Gnosticism in early centuries CE posed profound challenge to emerging Orthodox Christian hierarchy. Gnostic communities were diverse, decentralized, intellectually vibrant. They attracted thinkers, mystics, people interested in direct spiritual experience. Their teachings questioned not only the Creator God's identity, but also institutions claiming exclusive access to divine truth. From early church leaders' perspective, Gnosticism threatened ecclesiastical structure's foundation. If enlightenment came from within, if divine knowledge was personal rather than clergy-mediated, then bishops' and councils' authority was far less necessary. The Church could not tolerate a movement claiming the material world, and by extension, its worldly power structures, were a lesser deity's work. Irenaeus of Lyon, writing around 180 CE in Against Heresies, mounted systematic attack against Gnostic teachings. He documented their beliefs in detail, ironically preserving knowledge of groups whose own texts were destroyed, while refuting them point by point. His primary argument, Gnostic interpretation, undermined Scripture's plain meaning and Christian community's unity. But beneath theological objections lay political reality. Christianity was becoming organized religion with defined hierarchy. Bishops, priests, deacons, established liturgy, standardized creeds. Gnosticism, with its emphasis on secret teachings and inner revelation, resisted this standardization. Different Gnostic groups taught different cosmologies, used different texts, emphasized different practices. As Christianity moved toward unity, this diversity became liability. The Church sought defining orthodoxy, establishing which books were scripture, which teachings were authentic, which communities were legitimate. Gnosticism, by its nature, resisted such definition. The tension reached breaking point as councils began defining orthodoxy and condemning alternative interpretations. The Council of Nicaea in 325 CE, though primarily concerned with Christ's nature, established precedent for authoritative ecclesiastical declarations. Subsequent councils expanded this authority, systematically excluding teachings that conflicted with emerging consensus. The suppression became systematic. Texts were banned, copies were burned. Possession of Gnostic writings became dangerous. Gnostic teachers faced exile or worse. Communities were pressured to conform or dissolve. The idea of false creator ruling the world was too dangerous. It undermined the Old Testament God's theological identity. It questioned ecclesiastical authority's legitimacy. And perhaps most threatening, it empowered individuals to pursue truth without institutional mediation. Consider what Gnosticism challenged. If Yaldabaoth, not the true God, gave Moses the law, what authority do those laws carry? If the material world is Archonic prison, why does the Church accumulate material wealth? If gnosis comes from within, why do you need priests? These questions threaten not just doctrine, but institution. The Church's growing political power in the Roman Empire depended on its claim to exclusive spiritual authority. Gnosticism undermined that claim at its foundation. By the 4th century, Christianity had become Rome's official religion. Imperial power now enforced theological conformity. What began as religious debate became legal mandate. Heresy wasn't just wrong theology, it was criminal offense. The Codex Theodosianus, compiled in 438 CE, contained laws against heretics, including Gnostics. Their property could be confiscated. Their meetings were illegal. Their texts were ordered destroyed wherever found. For 16 centuries, Gnosticism survived only in fragments, preserved indirectly through opponents' writings. Irenaeus, Hippolytus, Epiphanius, church fathers writing to refute Gnosticism, became the primary sources for Gnostic beliefs. The irony is profound. We knew Gnostic teachings primarily through those who hated them. Then, in December 1945, Muhammad al-Saman discovered the Nag Hammadi library. Someone, perhaps monks from the nearby Pachomian monastery, perhaps a Gnostic community facing persecution, had hidden these books, hoping they might survive. They did. The discovery revolutionized understanding of early Christianity. For the first time since antiquity, scholars could read Gnostic texts in the Gnostics' own words, without the distorting lens of opponents' summaries. What emerged was sophisticated, nuanced tradition, blending myth, philosophy, spiritual psychology in ways far ahead of its time. The Gnostics weren't naive dualists or world-hating pessimists, as church fathers portrayed them. They were sophisticated thinkers grappling with existence's deepest questions. Why does the world contain suffering? How can limited, flawed material reality emanate from perfect divine source? What is consciousness's nature? In a modern world searching for meaning beyond dogma, the Gnostic narrative found new resonance. The myth of Yaldabaoth, once suppressed, became a lens through which people re-examined power, consciousness, reality's hidden structures. But how does this ancient cosmology speak to contemporary concerns? In contemporary thought, Yaldabaoth has taken on new interpretations, some symbolic, some psychological, some startlingly modern. The false creator god resonates across disciplines because the questions he represents remain urgent. Who defines reality? What systems maintain control through ignorance? How do we distinguish authentic authority from its imitation? Carl Jung saw the Demiurge as expression of the shadow, the unconscious, unintegrated aspects of psyche creating inner conflict. In Jung's framework, Yaldabaoth represents the part of ourselves believing it is the center of the universe, unaware of deeper forces shaping it. The ego, mistaking itself for totality of consciousness, becomes personal Demiurge, our own inner false god claiming supremacy over the fuller self. Jung wrote in Answer to Job that the Old Testament God exhibits qualities suggesting unconsciousness, jealousy, rage, need for praise. These are not Supreme Divinity's attributes, but shadow material. Jung argued that religious development involves integrating these shadow aspects, recognizing them as part of larger self. The Gnostic myth, in this reading, is psychological map showing consciousness's journey from ego inflation to self-integration. The Demiurge also appears in modern metaphysics through simulation theory. Philosopher Nick Bostrom's simulation hypothesis proposes that advanced civilizations might create simulated realities indistinguishable from base reality. If true, we could be living in such simulation, created by beings we would never perceive. This echoes the Gnostic depiction of flawed cosmic architect. In this analogy, Yaldabaoth becomes the simulation's programmer, while the pleroma represents higher reality beyond the code. The divine spark becomes consciousness's irreducible core, the part of us that might transcend the simulation if it awakens to its artificial constraints. Philip K. Dick, the science fiction author, became obsessed with Gnostic themes after experiencing visions in 1974. His novel, Valleys, describes the black iron prison, the archonic control system extending across time. Dick believed the Roman Empire never fell, but continues operating invisibly, maintaining humanity in spiritual bondage. In his cosmology, the true God sends information to help prisoners escape, transmitted through art, dreams, synchronicities. Hermeticism contains parallel structures. The Corpus Hermeticum describes the cosmos as series of spheres ruled by planetary spirits. To reach the divine realm, the soul must ascend through these spheres, shedding attributes at each level: anger at Mars, desire at Venus, deceit at Mercury. This mirrors the Gnostic soul's journey through archonic domains. Kabbalah distinguishes between Ein Sof, the infinite divine, and the Sephirot, emanations through which Ein Sof manifests. Some Kabbalistic traditions describe the Qliphoth, husks or shells representing reality's broken, distorted aspects. These function similarly to Archons, forces maintaining limitation and separation. Buddhist philosophy addresses similar territory through different language. The material world is Maya, illusion. Attachments and ignorance bind consciousness to samsara, the cycle of rebirth. Liberation comes through prajna, direct insight into reality's nature. While Buddhism doesn't personify ignorance as a false creator, it recognizes that our perception is structured by limitations we mistake for truth. Certain strands of Hindu philosophy distinguish between Brahman, ultimate reality, and Brahma, the creator deity. Brahma, though powerful, is not ultimate. He creates the material world according to limited understanding. Liberation involves recognizing one's identity with Brahman, not Brahma's creation. In occult traditions, the Archons are sometimes interpreted as psychological complexes, societal forces, or energetic patterns influencing human behavior. Magician and philosopher Terence McKenna suggested the Archons represent linguistic and cultural structures maintaining consensus reality. Breaking from these structures, through psychedelics, meditation, art, allows glimpsing reality beyond the archonic control system. Contemporary philosopher John Lamb Lash, in Not in His Image, argues that the Gnostic texts provide warning about patriarchal, authoritarian thought patterns dominating Western civilization. Yaldabaoth becomes symbol for ideologies claiming exclusive truth, demanding absolute obedience, threatening punishment for non-compliance. Feminist theorists have found the Sophia narrative particularly significant. Wisdom, the divine feminine, creates unintentionally, but her mistake becomes catalyst for liberation. Unlike patriarchal narratives where feminine errors require masculine correction, Sophia redeems herself through persistent work awakening trapped consciousness. Whether taken literally or metaphorically, the myth of Yaldabaoth continues provoking reflection. It challenges assumptions about authority, divinity, reality's structure. It invites considering the possibility that enlightenment is not granted by external forces, but discovered within. These parallels suggest the Gnostic myth taps into universal human intuition. The sense that the world we see is not the full story, that behind visible reality lies something more fundamental, that awakening is possible. At its core, the myth of Yaldabaoth is not an attack on faith. It is not rejection of the divine, nor condemnation of religious tradition. Rather, it is profound exploration of ignorance versus awareness, illusion versus insight, authority versus inner truth. The Gnostics used myth not to explain the cosmos scientifically, but to illuminate the human condition, our longing, our confusion, our potential for awakening. They understood that the most powerful truths cannot be stated directly. They must be experienced. The story of Yaldabaoth creates a framework for that experience. Consider what the myth reveals. Not all who claim authority possess understanding. Power should not be confused with wisdom. Creation should not be mistaken for perfection. Structure should not be assumed as truth. These distinctions matter because they determine whether we approach existence with eyes open or closed. The story of Yaldabaoth reminds us that the true source of divinity is not found outside ourselves, but within the spark Sophia placed in every soul. This is not narcissistic self-worship. It is recognition that consciousness itself carries trace of the divine source, that awareness, properly cultivated, can transcend the limitations matter imposes. The Gnostic path is not about escaping the world, but seeing through it. Not about rejecting creation, but understanding its layers. Not about overthrowing a false god, but transcending the limitations that ignorance imposes. This teaching endures because it speaks to essential human struggle, the tension between what we are taught to believe and what we intuitively sense to be true. Every person confronts this tension. Every culture navigates the balance between tradition and innovation, authority and autonomy, external teaching and inner knowing. The Gnostics chose inner knowing. They taught that authority must be questioned, that tradition must be examined, that external teachings must be tested against direct experience. This made them dangerous to institutions claiming exclusive truth. It makes them relevant to any era where power structures depend on collective unconsciousness. The Archons rule through ignorance. Knowledge erodes their foundation. Every moment of genuine insight, every experience of transcendent awareness, every recognition of consciousness's divine nature weakens the prison's bars. Not through violent revolution, but through quiet awakening. If the Gnostics are right, then every step toward awareness strengthens the Pleroma's light, restores Sophia's balance, and brings us closer to reality that has always been our true home. The material world does not need to be destroyed. It needs to be seen for what it is: temporary structure, teaching tool, crucible for consciousness development. Yaldabaoth, in the end, is not villain, but teacher. His ignorance shows us what ignorance creates. His pride demonstrates pride's cost. His fear reveals what fear produces. And his eventual recognition, when he finally understands he is not supreme, models the awakening available to all consciousness. The myth invites us to question, to seek, to remember. It suggests that liberation is not granted from above, but discovered from within. And it offers hope that no matter how dense the illusion, how powerful the Archons, how entrenched the ignorance, the divine spark of the monad cannot be extinguished. It waits, patient, for recognition. If these explorations stir your curiosity and light the divine spark within you, make sure to like and subscribe for more journeys into hidden truths. Stay tuned for our next videos on this subject. Until next time, keep questioning. Good night.